Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Hi. I know I've met most of you before, but as Seth says, I'm Sylvie. I'm the assistant curator here. And I'm talking to you today about three shows, 2 exhibitions and 1 display that we're opening this season. We've had a very busy few weeks. So we've got, first one, we're going to be talking to you about Rembrandt in print, and then we're going to be talking about Matisse, Master of Line, which of course has been open for the past week or so. And then we're going to be talking about Coming Home, Ira Aldridge, which is a spotlight loan from the National Portrait Gallery, which arrived yesterday. As always, if you can't hear me at the back, then please do just raise your hand and I'll speak a bit louder. Okay, so Rembrandt in print is going to be opening on Friday, and this is a touring show that's been organised by the Ashmolean Museum. We are the second venue to have this show, so it's been on over the summer at the Lady Lever Art Gallery in the Wirral. After us, it's going to be going to the North Hertfordshire Museum in Hitching. That will be next year, beginning of next year. And then in the summer, it's going to be going to the Crawford Art Gallery in Cork. And we're really, really lucky to have this show here. It's an amazing opportunity to see some of the highlights from the Ashmoleans collection. So it's 50 prints from the Ashmoleans collection of 200 works by Rembrandt, or 200 prints by Rembrandt. And these are dated between 1630 to the 1650s, so they stretch across Rembrandt's career. He was incredibly interested in printmaking throughout his career. And we've got this great print here, which is a self-portrait etching at a window, which is one of the few examples where we can actually see Rembrandt in his sort of etch-making process here. And what's great is, although he's sort of looking out at us, he's actually looking into a mirror at this point. So I think this creates this really nice sense of intimacy and just gives us a little insight into his printmaking process. So the exhibition is organised thematically with subjects including his self-portraits, his family portraits, landscapes, religious scenes, nude studies, genre scenes, and also a little bit about the techniques that he used and how he actually created his prints. At the very beginning of his career, he was self-taught in printmaking, and he started when he was in his hometown of Leiden around end of the 1620s. And our earliest work in the show, what the show opens with, is a self-portrait dated to 1630, which is this one here. At the beginning of his career, he's really focused on making these very informal portraits, so it's friends and family, and also self-portraits such as this one. So this is really interesting because it sort of plays the scale a bit. The actual print itself is tiny, it's like that sort of size, it's a stamp size. And this comes from a series of prints he made around 1629, 1630, where he's experimenting with different facial expressions. So here he's got this sort of like angry, shouty facial expression. And it's thought that at this point he was looking to build a repertoire of looks that he could use in later works. So this is a really lovely kind of work to start with in the show. The second section of the exhibition is dedicated to techniques. And I want to show you guys a video. We've had some slight technical issues this morning, and it doesn't have any sound, but it does have subtitles. And it's worth looking at just from the perspective of not only Rembrandt, but also Matisse. So it will show us how etchings are made.
Etching is a medium that is part of the intaglio process of printmaking process. It consists of a metal plate to which an even ground is applied. The ground is a wax ground and acts as a resist for the subsequent etch. A drawing is made, a design is created into the ground, and this ground is then placed in a mordant bath which used to be an acid, such as a nitric or a hydrochloric acid, but now is very commonly a copper sulfate solution. Plates then removed from the etching solution, cleaned, dried, and the wax ground removed with a solvent. This should then reveal the drawn image etched into the plate, ready to be charged with ink. The plate is usually then placed onto a hot plate, a heated plate, that will allow the metal of the plate to warm up, which will make the ink that is subsequently forced into the lines, the etched lines of the plate, to become soft. Ink is evenly dragged across the surface of the plate and pushed down into the etched lines. The ink is then cleaned from the surface of the plate, leaving ink only in the recessed areas of the plate. The plate is then moved to a press, which will apply the pressure to allow the ink to be pulled from the lines and transferred to the paper. Usually this is done with some kind of registration template to allow you to work out where the plate will go on the bed of the press in relation to where the paper will then go. Prior to printing, the paper, which is usually a heavy watercolour type paper of around 250 grams or more, is soaked in a bath of water to prepare it ready for printing. This process allows the paper to become soft and therefore more likely to be pushed down into the etched lines of the plate from the pressure of the press. This paper is then transferred to the press, placed on top of the etching plate, and a set of felt blankets are then evenly placed on top of this. This is then wound through the press in a regular motion, an even motion. Pressure is applied through the blankets from the rollers onto the etching plate through the paper that has been placed in the press. Once this paper is lifted, it will reveal the subsequent etching. You'll notice that this print prints as a mirror of the drawing. The plate is then re-inked and subsequent prints are taken depending on the required number of prints that the artist wants. This is usually referred to as an addition, and you will very commonly see an addition mark, usually on the left-hand side of any print, which indicates the number of prints in the edition and the order of that particular print in that edition.
Okay, so it is, yes. So just move forward. So that is going to be on an iPad just outside the Roper Gallery on the intro wall. So it's going to be silent and just with the subtitles so that visitors can see that process as well. And like I said, that will be helpful both for Rembrandt and Matisse, who both work, the majority of their prints are etchings. Rembrandt also worked with two other types of printmaking processes, one of which is called dry point, which is very similar to the etching process, but it removes from the process the acid-resistant wax. So instead, Rembrandt would literally etch directly into the metal plate, which would normally be a copper plate. And it's with a slightly blunt tool called a dry point needle. And what that does is, as he would sort of etch directly in, it would raise the edges of the lines. And that would mean that more ink could actually be in the lines themselves. And it creates these sort of very rich, velvety, deep lines. So dry point is something that Rembrandt used both for sort of small retouchings in his prints, so he would combine them with the etching process, but he would also make entire prints in dry point. And this print in particular, this is the sort of the masterpiece of the exhibition. This is a really, really remarkable print. Partly due to the fact that it is made entirely from dry point, which is a much more difficult process than etching. And also dry point is far more fragile, so because of the sort of ridges of the lines, you can actually make fewer, you can only make a few impressions using the dry point process. So yeah, this is one of the star works. It's one of the largest works, one of the largest prints that Rembrandt ever made, and it's printed on Japanese paper, which the Dutch had access to through the Dutch East Indian Company. And Japanese paper was far smoother than European paper and could actually absorb more ink. And actually, you can see, I don't know how well you can see it in this image, but there's the top layer of the paper has actually been attached. There's an extra section that's been attached, which just sort of shows the scale of this work. So this is Christ presented to the people, and it's the moment when Christ comes out and is presented by Pontius Pilate. It's in the section of the exhibition dedicated to religious subjects, which was the majority of Rembrandt prints were religious subjects from both the Old and New Testament. This work is, there's actually only 8 impressions that exist in the world of this print in this composition. Rembrandt clearly wasn't very happy with this composition because in later editions he actually scratched out this group of figures here. And we don't know why. It might have been because it created more of a boundary between Christ and the viewer, possibly. So there are actually only 8 editions or 8 impressions, that show this group of figures in the foreground. The other printmaking process that Rembrandt used is engraving. And engraving is in the same way as dry point. It removes the process of the acid-resistant wax, and he would literally draw straight into the metal plate, but this time with a much sharper a needle, an engraving needle, and this would create really fine, controlled lines. So a lot of the sort of the fine hatching you can see around the edges, this is engraving. And this is another one of the star works of the show. There's a few star works of the show, but this is another one. And this is in a section at the end of the exhibition called Daily Life, which is mostly about genre scenes, so scenes of sort of everyday life in Amsterdam. This work in particular is remarkable for being Rembrandt's only still life print. So it's the actual shell itself is called a marbled cone, and it's thought that Rembrandt actually owned this shell. He was a collector of natural history objects, and he would sort of draw and paint them. And he has really taken a lot of time to sort of make this as realistic as possible. But he made one mistake with this, which was actually to do the spiral with the shell the wrong way around. So in the process of printmaking, the image is reversed, and so he's obviously done it in reverse, and it's actually come out not how how these shells are in real life. There's been sort of various suggestions about what this also looks like. We've kind of had people say it kind of looks like a carpet rolled up, or a Gillian's chocolate is another one, but yeah, it is a marbled cone. We have one section dedicated to landscapes, and Rembrandt was a keen landscape printer. He would sort of explore the countryside outside of Amsterdam and Leiden and create some sketches and go back to his studio and create these prints. And he's more interested in creating an atmosphere in his landscape prints rather than actually showing them realistically as the landscape of the countryside is. So this is one of his most famous landscape prints. This is called The Three Trees. And the landscape section comes straight after the religious section in the exhibition. And this is the first work in the landscape section. And the reason for that is because not only is it really important, but it also has a sort of religious significance to it, being that the three trees are thought to signify the crucifixion and the three crosses. And there's some just amazing detail in this, and you can't really see it that well from here, but there is, for example, around here, there's a couple doing something, and I also wanted to show you just a little, so zoom into this, which is, as you can see, there's an artist sketching on a hill, and it's quite tempting to think that that actually could be Rembrandt himself. So yeah, you've got this sort of amazing, the trees are framed by this amazing kind of atmospheric rain clouds, and it really is worth sort of really looking at in detail with the magnifying glasses when you go in and see the show. Okay, so I wanted to just mention a couple of other exhibitions that are going on and what else is going on in the sort of museum world. And actually what I forgot to say at the beginning of this talk, and what's really important about this exhibition is that it comes in the International Year of Rembrandt, which is the 350th anniversary of the artist's death. So he died in 1669. And with this anniversary, there's been a whole number of exhibitions that are going on both in the UK and sort of internationally. So earlier on in the year, the Rijksmuseum had an exhibition of all the Rembrandts. So I think that was, I think it's 22 paintings, 60 drawings, and 300 prints, which sounds exhausting to go around, but I'm sure it was amazing. Opening the same day as us, Dulwich have got an exhibition of Rembrandt's Light, which is curated by Jennifer Scott, former director here. And that is a thematic show that looks at Rembrandt's use of chiaroscuro and light in his paintings. And then at the beginning of next year, there is, at the Ashmolean Museum, there's going to be an exhibition on young Rembrandt, which is the first 10 years of Rembrandt's career, mostly focused in Leiden, his hometown. And the exhibition actually is opening in Leiden this autumn and will be touring to the Ashmolean Museum at the beginning of next year. And that is curated by the same curator that has curated our show here, the touring show. So, and that is Anne Van Camp, who is the curator of Northern Works at the Ashmolean Museum. So there is a publication that comes with this this exhibition, which has been written by Anne Van Camp. It's £15, and that's going to be in the shop. So just make you aware of that. And just wanted to speak very briefly about the sort of exhibition practicalities. So you'll see as you go up there that there is a new build in the ROPA. We've put a new wall up, which is a sort of introductory wall just as you go in. And so as you walk in, you'll sort of be faced with all of these, the Rembrandt space coming, sort of looking at you. All of the works are glazed, so there are no barriers. We are required to keep light levels to a minimum. This is because these are works on paper, so they are particularly sensitive to light levels. Photography will be allowed, but without flash, and we are encouraging visitors to share on social media their photos. And there will be magnifying glasses on the benches for people to look at, because it really does, many of his prints, some of them are so small, and you really do want to sort of get up close and look at them in a lot of detail. So that's Rembrandt. I'm going to, I think we'll probably sort of take questions at the end once I've kind of spoke about all of them. So the next show is Matisse Mastered Line, which is open until the 5th of January in the Worth Gallery. I'm sure that many of you have already seen the show. And this exhibition comprises of 19 etches and one monotype, so 20 works altogether that come from a collection of a London collector and dealer, John Casman, who collected Matisse works from the 80s and then for the following 3 decades, and he put his works up for sale at the end of last year, and they have subsequently been dispersed, but they've been brought back together for this show. So Matisse obviously is one of the sort of great painters of the 20th century and one of the great colorists in art history. But I think what this show really shows is his skill, his draftsmanship, and his ability to capture sort of likeness and form with actually really very few lines. So he reduces many of his prints just to the bare essential lines, which I think you can see in this. He, unlike Rembrandt, who had a sort of sustained interest in prints throughout his career, Matisse worked with prints only in sort of short, sharp bursts throughout his career when he was sort of unable to paint. So one of those periods was around 1914 to 1917. So with the First World War, he had a break from painting and turned to printmaking. And actually, in the same way as Rembrandt, with his early prints, he focuses on sort of informal portraits of friends and family. So we've got these 2 works in the show. So this one here is a double portrait of Cosette Gris, who was the wife of the Cubist painter Juan Gris, who the couple were sort of left stranded in the southwest of France around the First World War, and Matisse befriended them, and in part of that friendship, he created this portrait of her. And you can see there's a sort of playfulness there. It's a double portrait, and I think there's sort of 2 aspects of her character coming out there, and it's quite informal and sort of study-like, I think. And then on the left-hand side here, we have a portrait of Walter Pack. So Walter Pack was a American art historian, critic, curator, who was a real advocate for Matisse in America, and he sort of connected Matisse with collectors in America. And Walter Pack came to Paris in 1914 to put together a Matisse show that was going to be happening in New York later on. And there's a lovely story about this portrait here, which I think sums up Matisse's printmaking process. So Matisse and Walter Pack met one morning and were talking for several hours. And as Walter got up to leave, Matisse said, "Oh, actually, can I do your portrait very quickly?" And in order to convince him that it would be very quick, he says, "It will only take 5 minutes, and I will time myself." So that's what he did. So Matisse timed himself and drew this portrait here. And then at the end, he said, "This is not serious. Come back in a couple of days, and we'll actually do a proper portrait of you." But when Walter Pack came back, Matisse had actually turned this sketch into a final print. And then after a few other attempts of different portraits, the 2 of them decided that this was actually their favourite depiction of Walter, and it kind of has this sense of immediacy and kind of intimacy that Matisse wasn't getting in sort of more laboured portraits. So I think that kind of gives a sense of Matisse's printmaking process, which is both at once quite spontaneous and deliberate at the same time. I think walking around the show, there is a real intimacy there, and also a kind of immediacy. So around the same time, so also around sort of the First World War, Matisse also made a number of monotypes. So he made 69 monotypes during this period. And this is the only time he ever worked in this medium in his career. And monotypes are made by inking a completely bare metal plate and then drawing the image into the ink itself and pressing it down. And that then creates a unique print. So this work here is sort of lovely still life with a goldfish bowl. When you walk around the exhibition, you'll see that goldfish bowls are a particular motif, a favourite motif of Matisse's. So the majority of works in this show are dated to 1929, which is when Matisse turned back to printmaking after he had some bad reviews for an exhibition that was held. And at that point, he really felt sort of unable to paint. And at this point, most of his prints are nude studies. There's a kind of there are similar themes that come out during this period. So nude studies, particularly of female dancers, that he would actually draw from life in his studio. You also see a lot of North African textiles and props, and also again sort of the goldfish bowl. And this is one of my favourite prints in the exhibition, and I think one of my favourite prints from the sort of 1929 period. I was thinking this morning, actually, I think it's because it sort of reminds me a bit of Vuillard and Lauren Child. There's a sort of a strange perspective here. It's a really sort of steep perspective. And what's really remarkable about this is that with just a few, very reduced number of lines, Matisse has created this entire quite ornate setting. I think the crop is also really, really interesting here, how he sort of cropped out one of her eyes, so you would just have this one eye kind of looking directly out at you. And you almost feel like you're sat on the floor with her. So it's going back to the sense of this intimacy that you get with many of his prints. So just some exhibition practicalities. So there are no barriers, as all the works are glazed. There is strictly no photography in this exhibition, unfortunately, and that is due to the Matisse estate, who are very strict on that. So unfortunately, no photography. And again, we are required to keep light levels to a minimum due to the fact that these are works on paper. And I just wanted to mention, actually, before going on to our Aldridge and Coming Home project, just the activities that are going on in the Sackler gallery this season. So these are inspired by Matisse and Rembrandt. And we have a fantastic drawing, a vinyl that Louise has put together. That's inspired by Matisse, and it's a woman staring at a goldfish bowl, and children are invited to create their own goldfish that they can sort of stick in the bowl. There's also there's going to be a blackboard where children are invited to, like, I think it's take a line for a walk, so sort of create their own lines on the blackboard. And then there's also is it a speaking board?
Basically, it's trying to give people a sense of the process of action. Obviously, that's very complex, so we found these it's black hard, but you can actually use silver, and it's focusing on Rembrandt. The idea of Rembrandt's eye, drawing your own eye or Rembrandt's eye. So it's the nearest
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's that to sort of direct families to in the Sackler gallery. And I just want to speak briefly about the Coming Home, Ira Aldridge, which is a spotlight loan that has come from the National Portrait Gallery, and it was installed yesterday, and it will be in our picture gallery until the 1st of March. So this is part of a sort of nationwide project with the National Portrait Gallery, where they have been, over the next 2 years, they are sending 50 portraits of iconic individuals or important people in British history to places where they have an association. And so we have Ira Aldridge. So Ira Aldridge was born in New York in 1807, and he moved to the UK, to Britain, in 1824. And in 1825, he made his debut on the London stage, and he went on to have an amazing career, acting career, across both Britain and Europe. He became one of the highest paid actors in the world. This work has come to the Holburne for a number of reasons. One of them being that one of the places that Ira performed in was Bath. So he performed his favourite double bill of Othello and a musical farce called The Padlock at the Theatre Royal in Bath in January 1832. But we also wanted to think about home in many different, the different sort of concepts of home, and not just home as a sort of physical space, but also in terms of identity and belonging. And so Ira Aldridge is on display within our collection of Somerset Maugham works. And it's really thinking about Ira Aldridge's home sort of on the stage, and also within the canon of great, of theatrical greats, so like David Garrick and Charles Macklin. We have a plinth that's just been installed in the picture gallery also, which invites visitors to, there's some pieces of paper which ask the question, what does home mean to you? And we're inviting visitors to write or draw their responses to that question, or indeed to this work, and then pop them just in the plinth, in the perspex box in the plinth. And then we're going to be sharing them with the National Portrait Gallery and also on our social media. Yes. And I just wanted to sort of, I'm not really going to speak about it, but because I know it's been up for a couple of weeks now. But of course, we also have Candace Williams' Box of Delights, which is on in the ballroom until the 5th of January. And as I know that you're all aware, there's no photography in there, and many of the works are for sale. So please do, if you have any queries from visitors about those, please do direct them to the shop. And I just wanted to end with just highlighting some events that are happening this season. So we have a film screening of Matisse, which is a behind-the-scenes documentary looking at the Matisse cutouts show that was on at Tate a few years ago, which apparently was sort of Tate's biggest ever exhibition. We also have some great updates coming up. So we have Print Mania, which is obviously all about printmaking, and that's happening in October. And actually we also, on the 21st of November, have a talk from the curator from the Ashmolean and Bandcamp on Rembrandt's printmaking. So, great. And then in January we have an update which is all themed around Shakespeare, and that is obviously connected to Ira Aldridge and the Coming Home project. So thank you. I'm sorry that it's sort of, there's been a lot to pack in and it's been brief, but has anybody got any questions? No? Okay. Okay, well, I think that you are now invited to go up and see the Rembrandt show. So I Spencer, and then they can take you up. Okay.
I'm sure but you may get some Matisse fans, you may they may know that actually no, I've seen the screen. That's not that sure something, but it's
Thank you.
I'm alright. Yeah. Too early in the morning. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh yes. Just left. Yeah, let's cut out this bit where I'm shouting.